Well, welcome to TVW's 2019 Campaign Classroom Broadcast. I'm Jerry Cornfield, a political reporter with the Everett Herald, a daily newspaper in Snohomish County. Today I'll be taking questions from students about some of the issues that are on the November 5th ballot, and many of the details we'll be talking about. You can find more information in the voters pamphlet that outlines each of the measures that we'll be discussing. And let's start with Referendum 88. The legislature passed Initiative Measure Number 1000 concerning affirmative action and remedying discrimination, and voters have filed a sufficient referendum petition on this act. Initiative 1000 would allow the state to remedy discrimination for certain groups and to implement affirmative action without the use of quotas or preferential treatment as defined in public education, employment, and contracting. All right, so what happened was last year, an organization got enough signatures to put Initiative 1000 in front of voters, and it dealt with changing our affirmative action laws. But then the legislature decided they liked it, so they adopted it, and they made it the law without going to the voters. But some folks who did not approve of that initiative, they got enough signatures to say, no, we'll put it in front of voters, and so that's Referendum 88. And what you need to do if you're a voter is, if you want to approve the law that's on the books, you want to keep it there, then you want to approve Referendum 88. And if you want to remove or repeal that law, you have to vote to reject R88. So let's take our first question.
Hi, my name is Mateo DeBreer. I go to Lake Washington High School. I'm a senior in AP Government, and I live in the city of Kirkland. My question has to do with Referendum 88, and it is, what do you think has changed since 1998 for people to go against what they initially voted for in the Washington State Civil Rights Act, and why they wanted to repeal this?
Okay, so what's happened since 1998 when the voters did pass Initiative 200, banning affirmative action, and that, as we know it, is over time a couple of things have been measured. First, in contracting, the number of businesses owned by women and minorities receiving public works contracts has gone down. So there's a concern that those groups are not being able to compete fairly and are underrepresented. So that kind of, I don't know if you wouldn't call it discrimination, although the number is low. And in order to boost that number, this initiative is aimed at trying to increase that. Admissions, that's just an unequal issue. The University of Washington and Washington State University of Public Colleges, they're trying to increase the number of historically underrepresented groups of students. And so they want to be able to do a different and better job, they say, of diversifying and achieving equity amongst the races. This initiative does create a governor's commission on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the point of that is to provide that, if you will, check and balance to make sure that no agency is going overboard in terms of setting quotas, setting numbers of individuals that should be admitted or given contracts or hired, and making sure that they haven't preferred one group or one class of individuals over another. The law says you can't. This commission's job is to really enforce the compliance with the initiative.
I'm Esther Strathy. I'm a senior taking AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, and I had a question around Referendum 88. So affirmative action typically creates different requirements for different races, and this can most often be seen in university acceptance rates. Harvard reported that their average SAT score admitted for Asian applicants was 768, with the next highest average group being white applicants with an average of 746. The Office of Financial Management found that the largest minority group in Washington state was Asian Americans, making up about 9% of the state's population. So my question is, how will Referendum 88 impact Asian Americans, seeing as they make up such a large part of the population and they have faced discrimination in the past with acceptance into universities?
Well, this initiative is not designed to impact one race over another race, at least according to the authors. And I think it's going to take time. And again, this is my opinion, but it will take time. If this becomes law and if the voters approve it, it will take some time and practice to determine exactly how it will affect any individual group. But the idea is that the SAT scores and all of the admission requirements won't change and that no group should be disadvantaged. That's the intention. But it's also the intention that underrepresented groups, as you might know, the Hispanic Americans are a larger percentage in the population of the state of Washington than they are in attendance at the University of Washington. So if the University of Washington wants to increase the number of Hispanic students, it is going to come at the cost, I would assume, of other groups. And so I think that practice is going to be where the real pressure is put. How will they increase one group without showing any bias or decreasing another group? And I think that's what this whole fight is about. What will be the actual impact? What changes will the university make to comply, not use quotas, not use preferential treatment, but what will it do to increase the number of students from different areas and different demographic groups? And I think we'll just have to wait and see what the practice is.
Hi, my name is Carlos Alvarez, and I'm a part of Mr. Dawson's AP Government class at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. I've got a question regarding Referendum 88. A lot of Asian Americans are concerned about Referendum 88 and Initiative 1000 negatively impacting them, especially at schools like UW, where Asian Americans make up a large percentage of the student body. What would you say to these worried citizens to try and ease their concerns?
Well, Carlos, the supporters of this measure and the ones that got it on the ballot have made very clear time and time again that there'll be no preferential treatment. And the initiative itself says in plain language it cannot use quotas or not use preferential treatment in terms of admissions. And so what I can say is that that's what the law says, and that the process that's gone on now that allowed Asian American students and any student to get into University of Washington, they're not supposed to, under this referendum, face any new hurdles or new barriers or be limited from getting into the university as a result of this law. That's what the authors of this initiative insist, and if that's not the case, as we've seen with other initiatives, it would end up in court after the fact.
My name is Paige Kelly. I am from Hawkins Middle School, and I am wondering if Referendum 88 will lead to discrimination in the work setting or in school.
Well, the intention of the authors of this Initiative 1000 and now the law is to reduce the potential for discrimination to occur in getting into a higher education or getting a contract to do public work or even in the employment with, say, the state of Washington or any public agency. So the intention of the initiative is that there will be less discrimination, but that the makeup of the workforce and the makeup of the students and the diversity would be greater. Opponents of the initiative have said time and again that they believe there will be more discrimination brought by this. They insist that when it becomes law and when it's put into effect, that agencies will actually prefer and use preferential treatment, which it says very clearly cannot happen, but they are not confident that that'll be the case.
My name is Amy Chen, and I'm a senior taking AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. I had a question regarding how Referendum 88 would apply to the admittance of athletes into colleges. For example, would affirmative action grant public education to a discriminated against athlete who has had a disadvantaged access to athletic training, and therefore be lower in skill than their contenders? Thank you.
Amy, it's an interesting question and a bit of a tough question. The initiative itself and the one that's in front of voters does not speak directly to any activity involving intercollegiate athletics. It's about getting into the college as a student, and it appears to have been focused on the academic side. The athletics and scholarships are not spoken to, so I couldn't say specifically whether an athlete who was disadvantaged in their training, access to training facilities, would be impacted one way or the other. But I could say that the conversation all throughout the campaign has been about getting into the university on an academic basis as opposed to a talented athlete who might get a scholarship and would be allowed to go from there.
Hi, my name is Ella Burke, and I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School. I'm in an AP Gov class, and I have a question on Referendum 88. So, would the races be all races, or would it be just races of, minority? Would it include white, Asian American, African American, everyone, or would it just be, the minority groups? Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear back from you.
Okay, the way this initiative is written, Ella, is that it doesn't specify any race. So all races and age, gender, and disability, the veteran status. All of these are classes of individuals under state law, and they'll all be treated, if we will, the same way. So one race will not be given a greater preference than another. That's the way it's written. That's what the authors, again, have said is their intention. And opponents are wondering if that's possible. They're wondering if, in practice, there'll be preferences for one race or one age group or one gender and so forth. So it's going to be when the rubber hits the road, is a cliche, but that's what's going to happen. If the voters approve this, the university, the state hiring, they're going to be able to tinker with how they allow students through admission and hiring and awarding of public works contracts, and to see, and we'll see what happens in actual practice. But to your question, the intent of the authors is not to prefer one race over another, and they say that would be against the law, and they won't do that. So we'll have to see if that's true.
Hi, my name is Hunter Sandall. I'm a student at Lake Washington High School in Mr. Dawson's 4th period AP Government class. So, Referendum 88 would completely eliminate current veteran preference that has been in Washington state law since 1895. If this were to be passed, how would they be compensated?
Well, Hunter, it's been looked at, this question about whether or not veterans would or would not face new discrimination if this becomes law. And there's about as many lawyers on one side saying veterans will not be harmed as there are some on the other who say, yes, they will. And I think right now, that's, again, one of those points, and that's the whole issue in political debate is who's right and who's wrong. And if voters pass Referendum 88, then we'll find out. Now, if you apply for a job today with the state and you're a veteran, you are able to get some points and assist you in being hired. So there is an advantage there. And the state has said that won't change, that they will not be changing their application forms. You'll still be able to if you're a veteran, check that box and get credit for that in the application, and it'll be part of the consideration. So they say nothing's going to change, and we'll just have to find out if that's the case.
Hi, I'm Katie Wehrman. I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School, and my question is about how affirmative action can impact LGBT communities, or if it's exclusive to people of color in those communities.
Well, this is a question that I think can go for any class of individuals. This initiative does not exclude LGBTQ communities, and it does not provide any preference to LGBTQ communities. It treats that community the same as it treats people of color and every other community that's listed when they've been looking at hiring and admissions. And so there should be no change. If anything, what will happen is, in practice, the policies that the university may use may reach out. Maybe there'll be a billboard or a job board or an application board that the LGBTQ community has that right now the University of Washington either isn't aware of or hasn't sent information to. They can and they will start to do that. That's what they say. So there should be no disadvantage to the LGBTQ community as a result of the passage of this initiative, so say the sponsors.
Hi, my name is Marianne Zhou from Lake Washington High School's AP U.S. Government and Politics class in Kirkland. While affirmative action aims to create an equal playing ground for minority groups, does this mean that a less qualified candidate can be chosen over a higher qualified candidate solely due to their race? Thank you.
Well, there's probably a simple answer and then a more complex answer. The simple answer is no, they shouldn't be able to on paper. But the more complex answer is, and I think individuals, I think you all know that you're all, as students getting ready maybe to go to college, that you're not all equal. Maybe your SAT scores aren't, your AP scores aren't, your abilities are not all equal, but you all probably are deserving of being able to attend the same university. And there's more people who want to get in than there are slots available. And so what the universities want and what the state wants in its hiring is to look at its record of how have we done? Which groups and classes are underrepresented in our ranks? And what do we do about trying to equalize and make it fair? And so that's when the subjective decisions will be made. And I think that is the real concern, and why there's a governor's commission to keep an eye on this and to monitor, is there's concern that the effect of this initiative will lead to quotas and preferential treatment, and that those decisions it's just going to take time to see what happens with the actual practice if it passes.
Hi, so I have a question about affirmative action, also known as Referendum 88. I'm wondering, so I'm Asian Indian, and so I'm wondering, would affirmative action allot more spots for Asians or less spots relative to what it currently is? Because Asians are the largest minority group, so I'm just wondering how that would affect their college applications.
Well, as you may know, the reason this measure is in front of voters is because a large group of Asian Americans coalesced, raised money, gathered the signatures, and are making an attempt to repeal the Initiative 1000 that lawmakers passed. And that has been, the issue you raise has been an overriding issue in this campaign. Will it or will it not lead to new forms of discrimination? Now, if you look at the language of Referendum 88, you'll see that on one hand it says, hey, it permits the state to adopt policies to allow race, sex, ethnicity, disability, even honorably discharged veteran to be used as a factor. But then in another part it says very specifically that none of those can be used as a sole qualifying factor. In other words, it cannot be used to prefer. You cannot pick just a person by their race or age or disability and put them ahead. And so that's what the initiative says. It also says that to enforce this and to make sure state agencies don't do that, they're going to create this kind of commission. Lawmakers and lawyers will be on it and try to monitor it. So the short answer is it's not supposed to happen, and you're not supposed to lose any opportunities as an Asian American student. But again, in practice, we'll have to find out if it passes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Freeman, and I'm in an AP Government class at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. Regarding Initiative 1000, how will allowing affirmative action truly increase diversity in universities or at the workplace?
Well, in answer to your question, how will it truly increase diversity? That's a real challenging question in that what they're doing now, they hope to do more of in more places. I mean, over time, the enrollment at the universities has become more diverse. But to actually reflect the population of the state or the population of the community where the universities are, it's going to take even more effort than before. And so one of the key goals of this initiative is to sort of free up the recruiters to go places and to make more effort to recruit students from underrepresented communities and maybe go into areas where they've never gone before and put up flyers and hold meetings. And so their hope is they can do that without being in violation of the law, because they do want to reach out to particular classes of students. I'm going to use Hispanic here in this case, that are underrepresented compared to their population. They want to be able to go into the community specifically to say, hey, come to our college. Here's what you need to do. And they don't want to be in violation of the law to try to increase the number of applicants. So this law should increase the number of applicants. Whether or not it will actually truly lead to a more diverse student population, again, that will take time to see who gets admitted, and we'll have to take a couple years to find out.
Hi, my name is Tara Afsharirad from Kirkland, and I go to Lake Washington High School. I'm currently a senior taking AP Government, and my question is, if Referendum 88 were to be passed, in which affirmative action would be reinstated, how do you believe different demographic groups would either be at a disadvantage or an advantage when applying to in-state universities? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and it's really one of the questions at the core of this debate is how will this affect those students like yourself and others who may apply to get into a university in Washington? And it's yet to be seen. Let's be honest. It's going to be a new world. The institutions of higher education are going to expand their efforts to recruit students, and they're going to be able to add programs and add processes that to reach into communities around the state where they really haven't reached into before. So I don't want to say that there'll be an advantage or a disadvantage, but if all goes according to the way the university envisions this initiative, they'll now be able to get a greater pool, a larger, more diverse pool of applicants to get into the university. So then they can get a freshman class that might reflect the state better than it has in the past. So that's really what the goal is of the initiative, is to get more people into the pool for jobs at the state, into the university, or even competing for contracts. Thank you for the question. Now, let's move to Initiative 976. Now, Initiative Measure 976 concerns motor vehicle taxes and fees. And this measure would repeal, reduce, or remove authority to impose certain vehicle taxes and fees, limit annual motor vehicle license fees to $30 except voter-approved charges, and base vehicle taxes on the Kelley Blue Book values. Now, what this really boils down to is what's been known over the years as $30 car tabs. And if you own a car and you have to get the registration every year, you get the bill in the mail and you pay your bill, and then you get that little tab you put on the car. And that's what we're talking about. One of the big pieces of this initiative is to get that down to $30. So then you'll look at your bill, you'll see a lot of other things on there like weight fees, they'd go away, and a few other elements. So that's the goal, but there are other pieces that affect Sound Transit, light rail expansion, and also involves around 60 cities that have a local transportation benefit district where they also assess fees locally. That would be impacted. But let's take our first question on this initiative.
My name is Louis Medihi. I go to Ballard High School. I'm a senior, and I'm currently in Mr. Five's third period. I'm going to address Initiative 976. How would the state account for the lost tax money that this initiative would cause? And what specific funds will be cut due to this decrease in tax?
Well, first I have to say that I like that sweatshirt. As a UCSB grad, I know that will be the toughest question and the best question I'll get all day. But just kidding. But here's what the state is not sure they're going to do, actually. If Initiative 976 passes and it takes effect in December, according to the state estimates, the next budget, the budget that we're in right now, they'll lose close to $400 million in transportation funding. So what's going to happen, and I've talked to the state senator who's the chairman of the transportation committee, is they're going to go literally line by line through each budget item where they're going to lose money and they're going to make cuts. Now, some projects or some spending will have to be delayed. Most of the money that comes out is from what's called the multimodal account, which deals primarily with transit related, is not for pavement, it's not for building new highways. So we should see in the first 2 years an impact that is not about sort of delaying projects, but maintenance work, bus services and grants, new buses maybe. Those may go away or have to be delayed until they can figure out what to do.
Hi, I'm Adam Romano, a senior at Lake Washington High School, and I'd like to ask a question regarding Initiative 976. My question is, how negatively will the implementation of Initiative 976 affect environmental protection as it incentivizes personal transport over less ecologically damaging public transport systems and infrastructure? Thank you.
Well, the environmental impacts, if it passes, and if the state just does one thing, and if the local governments just do one thing, which is to cut spending because they'll have less money, then it will probably have more severe ecological impacts, because part of where this money goes is to expand light rail and to add bus service. And if that doesn't happen, more people will be in their cars, or at least people won't be able to get out of their cars. And so with more cars on the road, that leads to more congestion, that leads to more emissions from their cars if they're in traffic, which then leads to more harm to the environment, at least to the atmosphere. So that would be what I would say is the projected negative environmental impact if this passes. But again, government has ways, I want to make clear here and in other questions I'm sure, that there'll be reduced revenue. But this initiative doesn't prevent the state or local governments from going out and raising revenue again. They can ask voters. So what they lose, they could recoup by going to voters. And that's what the initiative sponsor says they should be doing. Next question.
How are you going to make up the lost revenue if Initiative 976 is introduced?
Well, that's a good question to dovetail from the last one, because that is a question the cities and the state and Sound Transit are all considering right now. And they have different options. So if it passes, there are cities, I'm in Snohomish County, so cities like Everett and Edmonds, Granite Falls, they have a transportation fee that they collect around $20 per vehicle. That would go away if this measure passes. So they'll have to decide amongst themselves, do they want to go out to voters and say, hey, we had this, you paid us, will you agree to put it back on your bill and pay us again? They can go directly to voters. The state is a little more difficult. They've had politically, they've preferred to raise the gas tax when they needed money for transportation, but it's pretty high. I think Washington's the second highest gas tax in the nation. So while that's an option, I don't see that being an option, so they're going to have to figure out where they come up with the money. The third organization that's hit by this initiative, Sound Transit, if they were to lose some of their revenue from the motor vehicle fees and taxes they collect, they too could go back to the voters. I don't think they want to, but they too could go back to the voters and ask for money. So that's probably where they're going to have to get it, from voters, with voter approval, I mean.
Hi, my name is Constance Grimes. I am a senior at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question today is, so Initiative 976 states that it could reduce car tabs to be just $30. I was wondering as how it may be balanced, as it seems that those who live in certain counties are benefited more than those who live in other counties. And to follow up with that, how can it be assured that those with vehicles registered in counties that could potentially be affected aren't going to pay more than $30?
So to your first question about what could be an inequity between counties, you're right. If there's less money in the total pot for the state as a result of going down to $30 car tabs, then the more urban areas are likely to get more of the money to fix the roads because they'll have more miles of highways. And the rural areas are very likely going to lose out on some of the projects. Already the State Department of Transportation says they can't do all the work and the maintenance that they need to do because they don't have enough money, and this will just make it worse. So there is a potential for some of the more rural or less populated counties to see less and lose out if this passes. So to the second part of your question, I'm not sure you can be assured that those folks in one county won't pay more when they register their vehicles than another, because each county will still have the power to raise local fees that they would put on their registration. So the $30 car tab, let's say the initiative passes, it goes down to $30, but then a county next year decides to ask their voters to put a $20 fee back on their car tab. So then they could be paying $50. And I think that's what is the likely outcome if this passes in the short term. And so then you would have folks who live in one county paying more than another. Now, I have to assure you, that already happens. If you live in the Puget Sound, if you're in King County, Snohomish County, Pierce County, large parts of those areas already pay a lot more to register their vehicle because they're paying for Sound Transit. And Sound Transit's car tabs, their portion, can be several $100s compared to, say, Thurston County, where I live. The amount I pay is far less. So it's already happening in terms of how much people pay. It differs from county to county, and it'll probably still be the situation even if this initiative passes.
Hi, my name's Jacob Muller. I'm from Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. I'm in Mr. Dawson's AP Government class, and my question is, if Initiative 976 gets passed, how will the state fund for public transportation?
Well, Jacob, thanks for the question. Public transportation gets funded a couple different ways. So let's start with it. If you get on a bus, you pay a fare. And then the organization that's running it, if it's a public transit agency, they also they collect some money from sales tax. That helps it operate day to day. And then they also receive money if they file for grants, or they can receive state funding for buying new buses or for operating, depending on where they are, rural transit providers can get more money, tends to be as opposed to big urban ones. But the point is that there's several sources of revenue right now for transit services. If this initiative passes, the state's portion and what the state provides or makes available will go down. And so they'll have to make it up some way. And it could be to ask voters. Again, I'm saying a lot of this is going into the hands of voters potentially in the future. They could raise the sales tax in their county. It just happened in Thurston County. They could raise it a small amount and use that money for transit services. They could raise fares. So whatever you pay now could go up 50 cents, could go up $1, so to raise money that way as well. So the outcome of if Initiative 976 may lower what you pay to renew your registration on your vehicle, but you could face other increases if you're trying to use public transportation. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, my name is Max Bennett, and I'm a senior taking AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. I have a question regarding Initiative 976. What programs does the revenue from the current taxes support? In other words, what programs will be hit when taxes on motor vehicles are reduced?
All right, well, Max, you've got a question that kind of covers the entire initiative. It hits, in the state program, it hits a number of accounts. The state's Office of Financial Management does an analysis of an impact of every initiative. They have a half a page in the voter's pamphlet, a big chart of which accounts. And there is almost, there's like 8 accounts that are hit. There's one for Washington State Patrol, so a little bit of money. And it's a lot of money to you and I, but a little bit in the state budget. They have $25 million in the next 2 years that will be taken out of the account that helps to run the State Patrol day to day. Now, that's not their entire budget, but that's about how much it takes to hire a few folks or give folks a raise. There's a snowmobile account. If this is the winter and folks are getting ready to go out, but if the trails aren't cleared because there's no money in the account, that's the impact. And they'll lose $1 million. The largest one is multimodal account, which deals with public transportation, but there's also accounts for rural roads and the motor vehicle account, which tends to be spent for pavement, fixing potholes, maybe just repairing that rut in the road, maintaining bridges. That's the one you see in the TV commercials. The motor vehicle account, that one is almost $80 million in the next 2 years. So there are a number of accounts, and one that I haven't mentioned yet today, the ferries. They lose a little bit. Now, and usually the state ferry system almost pays for itself with the fares, but they do rely on about $400 million a year from the state transportation budget, and they're going to lose a couple $1 million if this goes away.
Hi, I'm Miko. I'm an AP Gov student at Lake Washington High School, and I have a question on Initiative 976. So by lowering vehicle tabs to $30 would make cars be more accessible and would put more cars on the road. How would this affect traffic? Would it create longer commute times because of how many more vehicles are on the road now?
Well, I probably wouldn't make the same connection if it's the link between lowering the cost of registering your vehicle to $30 and putting more cars on the road. I don't know that people would buy more cars knowing that they'd only have to pay $30 to register. But to the larger point, if Initiative 976 passes and there's fewer dollars for public transportation, then people will have fewer options, and therefore they'll stay in their cars. They won't get out of their cars. Or it might force them to buy a car, even one that might be an electric vehicle, because they can't get a bus. So I think that is the concern. Sound Transit's big concern is that they passed in 2016 a big expansion plan to take light rail throughout Snohomish County and into Everett. If this passes, those plans will be a lot less money for those plans. It'll take a lot longer to get done. And so folks who are waiting to leave their car at home and board a light rail train to go into Seattle, well, that won't happen very soon, so they'll stay in their cars. So in the end, we'll have more congestion as a result, if the initiative passes.
Hi, my name is Riley Hart, and I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School, currently taking AP US Government, and I live in Kirkland. My question is on Initiative 976, and I was wondering how the implementation of this would affect our ability to fix dangerous highways and bridges? Thank you.
Well, it would affect the state's ability in that there would be less money year to year to do it. So they have a budget now. I can't tell you the exact number, but there's tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars that they want to dedicate to going around. You see the signs, especially during the summer, roads are being closed, and it's not just expansion. Sometimes they're just repaving I-5, revive I-5, that kind of work. Well, that work will still occur. It just won't get done as rapidly. They won't be able to do as many projects each year because they'll have less money. So the effect is that those highways that are considered dangerous or need improvements that might have been on a timetable, that timetable will be stretched out. It may take more years to get to getting those improvements done. Again, this is if Initiative 976 passes, there's less money, and if the state government and if the local governments decide not to ask voters to approve a tax increase to make sure they can get they don't lose that money.
Hi, I was wondering how Initiative 976 would affect road budgets in Washington state.
Well, the primary road budget, when you say, I think about cities and counties, they have a budget for trying to fix the potholes in their streets and make sure the sidewalks aren't cracking and and just run the chip seal when they take the machines out and put all the lay a little asphalt or tar down to fix some holes. Those budgets are going to lose hundreds of thousands or a few $1 million. There's 62 cities around the state that use that money to do those kinds of projects, and that'll end under a 976. So those budgets we're going to have to take that money from somewhere, where if they want to do their work, it's going to come out of some other program in those cities. So that would be the impact.
Hi, I'm Sydney and I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School. I have a question regarding Referendum 976. How will the completion of light rail and sound transit overall be impacted by the referendum?
Well, the big impact is that it wouldn't happen as fast. Under Initiative 976, the motor vehicle excise taxes that Sound Transit collects and that voters have approved would be cut or eliminated depending on how Sound Transit responds to the initiative. In 2016, voters in Sound Transit's area, which is King County, parts of Pierce County, and Snohomish County, they agreed to raise their motor vehicle excise tax so they could get the work done by around 2036, maybe 2040. The trains will be rolling in and out of Tacoma and Everett. But if Initiative 976 passes, those who lead Sound Transit say that timeline could be pushed out 10 years or longer because they would lose several $1 billion worth of revenue, the receipts from the motor vehicle taxes. So that's the big impact. It would take longer to complete. So now let's move to Senate Resolution 8200. The legislature has proposed a constitutional amendment concerning legislative powers in times of emergency. This measure would add catastrophic incidents to the specified times of emergency that the legislature may take certain immediate actions to ensure continuity of state and local government operations. And what this means is that when the big one hits, we're talking like the earthquake, when it hits and there's a disruption to government, maybe a loss of life, and there's no governor around and there's someone needs to take charge, the legislature would step in and be able to run the state and would be able to make the decisions that are necessary to get the state operating in a smooth fashion. That's the point of having this. It's called a constitutional amendment, which means the lawmakers have voted that they want to make the change, and now they have to get voters' approval to make the change to the Constitution. Let's take our first question.
It's Andrew Helmick from Hawkins Middle School in Belfair, Washington. And I'm wondering whether this will cause the Washington State Legislature to act without proper provocation in the fact of an emergency.
And can you tell them what you researched?
I researched SJR 8200.
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, the short answer is it shouldn't. Right now, and the history of this, you should go back in time. Provocation is exactly what spurred the legislature and to amend the Constitution originally to put this in the books. There was concern during the Cold War of an attack from our enemies, and And in the event of a massive attack, a nuclear attack, if of enough loss of life, and if the governor and the leaders of the state were unable to step in, then the legislature was empowered to step in to keep government running. Now, the concern is what happens if an earthquake hits, a tsunami, a landslide, some other major catastrophic event, not a nuclear attack, but a catastrophic, maybe natural disaster. If it accomplished the same damage and people weren't able to run, then the legislature would step in. So the intent is not to overreach, but just to be some kind of rule and structure for government in the event of one of those major natural disasters.
Hi, I'm Emma Christensen. I'm taking AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question is about the SJR 8200. I was wondering what the state would be able to do during catastrophic incidents if this bill was passed.
So in the short term, it puts the legislature in charge of government. And the concern, just up front, is that the opponents of this, and there aren't many opponents, most folks in the legislature supported it, are concerned that it doesn't prescribe specifically enough limits on what the legislature could do. And so there's concern that they might go too far in how they sort of set up government in the wake of a catastrophic incident. But it allows, the legislature, if there's no governor, they could actually appoint a governor if this were to happen. They could appoint heads of agencies to run the government. They could spend money as they can now, but they wouldn't need the governor to sign their budget. So they could spend and collect taxes and spend taxes and decide how to do that. So those are really keep the state running on a day-to-day basis. They would be able to make the decision. And if they needed to reshape how government is set up in an emergency, eliminate agencies, combine them, move forces, so forth, deploy workers, all of that would be under the power of the legislature in a catastrophic incident.
Hi, my name is Izzy McPherson, and I'm an AP Government student at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, Washington. My question to you is regarding the SJR 8200. My question is, during a catastrophic event, who in our government is responsible for making decisions in our state during this time of emergency?
Well, the short answer is 147 lawmakers if they've all survived a catastrophic incident, because the assumption is that the governor and the executive branch is not in power. If you know, if a governor were, for whatever reason, sickness or even if they passed away, there's a line of succession. Someone else would step up. And this is the theory here, is that all those folks aren't available. And now someone has to run the state of Washington. So then the legislature would have to run the state of Washington, and theoretically that means whatever political party is in the majority would have the votes to make those decisions. But they would step in. So it's really the final step. And this is an unimaginable incident. It's never happened. So we have to be careful that what we're doing here is the voters are being asked to amend our Constitution, which is the rule book for this state, how we do things. And they're trying to anticipate that moment in time that hasn't ever happened, what it'll look like. And this is the legislature, like I say, the 147 lawmakers would be the ones in charge at that point.
My name is Isabella Prush. I go to Lake Washington High School. I'm a senior in AP Government, and I live in Kirkland, Washington. Senate Joint Resolution 8200 states that the state constitution will be amended to provide governmental continuity during emergency periods. Does this mean that though the government will continue its normal functions, there won't be equal effort to work on helping our state come back from the catastrophic event?
No, it should not. The idea is that, again, this is a moment in time when no one's at the wheel for the state government. And so now the legislature steps in, gets behind the wheel to make sure the state of Washington continues to steer forward. And they would be able to pass legislation because they could appoint a governor, they could spend money, they could do all those things. They could order the resources be sent to where they need to be sent, emergency resources. They could incur debt that would be paid later to make sure there's food and water and power and roads get opened, all of that. Right now, if something tragic happens, it would be the governor, through their executive power, But this assumes that there won't be a governor or anybody in charge. And so the idea is that they would step in. The criticism, again, is that because we don't know what it would look like in a catastrophic incident, there aren't enough specifics in the minds of opponents to limit the legislature from over-legislating and doing too much, going too far. But the goal is that there would be someone leading the state in a catastrophic event.
Hi, my name is Jen Estes, and I'm a senior in AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question is regarding the Senate Joint Resolution of 8200. My question is, why should legislation be able to depart from the provisions of the Constitution during the time of an emergency?
So to answer that question, I want to make sure the folks understand the Constitution is, I think I've said before, a rule book. It's the framework for how this state is going to run. And it does envision a time when, from way back when, an attack during the Cold War, when the U.S. and Soviet Union were engaged and possibly people were worried about attack, they passed laws that in the event that Washington was attacked and mass casualties and loss of leadership, the legislature would be able to step in, pass laws, appoint people to positions of power. So the powers have been there. This now expands the situations in which they could step in, and it's a catastrophic incident is the words, and it envisions like a massive earthquake or a tsunami. So it's not new powers per se, but it's just an expansion of the possibilities of when those powers could be used.
I'm Julia, a senior in AP Government at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, and my question was on SJR 8200, and I was wondering what another example would be of a specified time of emergency that the legislature may take certain immediate actions to ensure of state and local government operations would be.
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't give you another example for Washington because, fortunately, it hasn't happened. There hasn't been a time in the state's 100-year history where something occurred, and the way the law is written now, an enemy attack, but something has occurred that shut down the state of Washington, that killed the governor and killed all the leaders. It just hasn't happened, or such tragedies, fortunately. But there have been incidents. March 2014, there was a landslide in Snohomish County, the town of Oso, and 43 people died. And the governor stepped in, and eventually the federal government stepped in, and they took care to do the cleanup, the rescue, all of that response. If you take that kind of catastrophe and move it to a level of statewide, that's what they're envisioning. Such tragic mass damage from a natural event would create a situation where the only people around are the state lawmakers. And so the legislature would then be in the position of appointing, like I say, a governor. They'd be appointing people to run the Department of Transportation and the State Patrol. They may even be in the position of having to appoint executives for individual counties if there was too much, if need be. So there isn't an example, but it is really the worst case scenario they're planning for in that event.
Hi, my name is Sophie Granston. I am in AP Gov at Lake Washington High School, and my question is regarding the Senate Joint Resolution 8200, and I'm curious to see what would classify as a catastrophic incident and to what extreme. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to look at the voter pamphlet because a catastrophic incident is it's not real clearly defined, but it describes it as an extraordinary level of mass casualties, damage, or disruption severely affecting the population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functions. And as I've described at other times in some answers to other questions, they're talking about, and they were thinking at the time that they passed this in the legislature, of a massive earthquake and tsunami, which could occur. Right? We have a big fault line, the Cascadia subduction zone that has the potential to have an earthquake of just very large proportion. You could see massive damage and buildings fall down, and you could see mass casualties. They're envisioning a situation like that in which the leaders of the state, the governor and some of the other leaders, would lose their life as well, and they would not be able to lead the state. And in that situation, in that catastrophic incident, that's when the legislature, under this constitutional amendment, would step in and be in charge. If voters don't pass this, the legislature could still be in charge in a catastrophic incident, but in the sense that if it was an attack from the enemy. But if voters don't pass this, it hasn't happened, nothing like that has ever occurred. They could try again later, but this is essentially preparing for the worst. That's the point of this, is trying to assume what could happen. It would be so bad, are we ready? And that was the intention of the authors, is just let's be prepared. Well, I want to thank all the students and teachers who participated in this year's campaign classroom. Election's right around the corner, so if you're of voting age, I want to encourage you to vote. If you're not, the Secretary of State's office has a mock election. You can participate in that right up until November 5th. Thanks again for all the questions. I'm Jerry Cornfield, and we'll see you next election.